Hey everyone, it's Tom Seymour from VHS Massacre. Have a few announcements here and there. So anyway, for those of you listening to this podcast, I definitely talk about some of the independent projects I'm working on, but I typically try to sort of add value to the listener or the watcher by kind of talking about things that maybe could work for you as an independent filmmaker, things that I did that didn't work, things that are helpful. So, it's sort of trying to strike a balance between definitely talking about my own work and trying to get it out there, but also, whatever advice I could possibly give that anyone is interested in. I try to provide that too. So this is a screenplay I finished. It's called Grand Falls Killings. This is an actual book that is currently out, a horror thriller in screenplay format with illustrations. So you can get this on Amazon. It's only $4.99, and there is a paperback. I actually have the proof of the paperback already. It's pretty cool. So that should be coming out in a couple days as well. But what happened with this was, so I had these documentary features I've done, VHS Massacre 1 and 2. They're sort of up and running, and they're doing well, and they're out. And so I was kind of having a desire to pivot back to narrative, but as you know, narrative filmmaking is very difficult. It's very expensive, and expensive meaning like you can do an independent film feature for $10,000. For an average person, that's still expensive. I think we see these Hollywood projects that are like 100 million, 200 million, 300 million, and it is just so out of touch with what a normal human being can generate, But nonetheless, there are independent filmmakers out there still doing it. I haven't seen it yet, but I was reading about Skinamarink, which is a YouTuber, made a $15,000 feature. We are still out there. Independent filmmakers are still out there fighting the good fight, making good work. So chin up and keep going. And if you want to make a film, you should do it, and you can do it. And there's very little excuse. I have a Blackmagic camera. It's a 4K pocket. And basically that is enough horsepower, and you can shoot flat. You can shoot, there's this film mode that allows you to do this really amazing stuff in post-production with color grading, because the color information is preserved in shooting flat. And you only need a couple lenses, and you really could do it. But it does start with a good foundation. So even if you're doing a documentary, there should be some kind of, you should have an organized idea, at least with documentary. And the narrative, you should have a pretty clear script. So what is Grand Falls Killings? Well, it's about this guy, Reggie, who lives in a food truck. He's forced to live in this food truck after these series of tragedies have happened, and they kind of forced his hand, and he ends up living in this food truck. But eventually he meets this woman, Dottie, and they team up, and they travel the countryside. But they are pushed into a very difficult situation, and the way they push out of it is violent and a little funny, and so it's very dark. It's a horror thriller with a touch of comedy in there. But in a sense, look, I'm thinking that to make this movie is probably $250,000 minimum. Max $500,000, and it's just not something I could do with $10,000. I'm not gonna like the way it comes out with this particular story, but I could plan out a feature that would cost $10,000. I would just have to I would have to create a story specifically to be made for that. I have a movie coming out next month called Exorcism of Fleet Marish, and that is an under $10,000 movie. I think cash on hand was $6,000, but then it creeped up to maybe $8,000 with food. I think that's what my buddy Tim Kulig was saying. I think food made us, there's about $1,500 in food. So Anyway, so basically, this was something where, you know, my mind works in a way where I want to see an end game for something creative. So if I'm writing music, I want to finish an album and put it out. If I'm writing a screenplay, frankly, I want a product at the end. I want something I can push. There is part of me that likes this sort of marketing aspect, at least in regard to having a finished piece of art, you know. So this was my solution: a paperback book and an ebook, and but along with these illustrations. Now, so no artificial intelligence was used in the writing of the book at all, but some of the illustrations were generated by Midjourney. And Midjourney is a type of artificial intelligence. It's a little difficult to wield. You can literally ask in a Discord thread, ask the AI to generate an image, and most of the time it does not get it. So it's fairly intensive in regard to doing rounds and rounds of questions and changes and stuff like that. But I did manage to get about 30 or 40 images. And this is a new frontier, and it's an interesting frontier about, you know, what is authorship and who is the authorship of those images, because they're created by this AI. But I did use the paid plan. I think it was about $30 a month, and that allowed for using the photos in commercial setting. And so I found it to be really interesting. And there is this debate about, you know, what does this do for artists and illustrators? I don't know what the end of that is, but I do have to say I would never ever be in a position to pay an illustrator for that many images. It's impossible. So in that sense, I do not think I'm taking away work from anyone. So I guess I'd be my thought on that one. You know, ultimately, if I could afford it, I would want a human being to do illustrations. I wouldn't want artificial intelligence doing it. So, and I think that could be a whole larger discussion, and I think that could be how things are down the road, is people will think of artwork created by humans as artisanal, almost, for lack of a better word, you know, and it will have a higher status. So that's my hope, you know. But then there is, I know some people who are using, I think you can use another type of AI for generating story ideas. I haven't used that. I actually don't want to use that. To me, that takes the fun out of it. I really just want to make my own stories, you know. But I know people who have done that, and apparently that's a thing. So it will be interesting to see if that could possibly disrupt, you know, how things are generated. Will the internet will Amazon get generated with, you know, 1 million books written by AI, you know? Anyway, so Grand Falls Killing, one of the things I did, again, to sort of vet this screenplay and to try to legitimize it as more than just something that I wrote, was that I used Film Freeway to enter a series of screenplay competitions. So Grand Falls Killings won 5 awards for Best Feature Screenplay in the Sea of Art, which is a Norwegian film festival. Who doesn't like Nordic noir, you know? Cineplay, Diamond Bell International Film Festivals, and there's a few others. But I think Sea of Art and Cineplay is pretty cool. Pretty happy about that. And yeah, I forget the other two. But so, you know, you have a screenplay, you have some awards, you generate an ebook, and then I'm going to push it. We're going to see, can I sell any of these? You know, is it possible? Who knows? The problem is, you know, there's that old saying, you have to spend money to make money. And I'm definitely not spending any money I'm spending no money on marketing. So I'm just going to use my social media network, the VHS master across all VHS Massacre across all social media formats has about 20,000 follows. If I count all of my personal stuff plus the VHS Massacre stuff, like the from Facebook to Instagram to TikTok to Twitter to Podbean and Spotify and all that, Stitcher Radio. So it is a decent basis for trying to push a product out, but it's going to be very hard. I mean, if you think of these major corporations, they're spending millions to promote certain books, So what I will say is, if you're a filmmaker out there and you've made some films or whatever, and you're kind of hitting yourself against your head against the wall, thinking of like, I can't just sit around, I want to do something. This could be fun. Like, you could write something, whether it's a novel or a screenplay, and you could publish it on Amazon, and make a paperback book and an ebook. And we as artists, we have to keep creating and trying different things. We never know what's going to work. I mean, you always hear this about musicians, right? They have these huge singles, these big hits. And sometimes they didn't know that one was going to be the big one. And then other times they thought maybe it would be, but it's the song they like the least. So there is this thing about not knowing what is going to hit. Not knowing. I can tell you about the VHS Massacre documentaries. When I did those, I had nothing left. My career was pretty much done. I think Mike Aransky let me do some work for IGN, and I was working at a community college, and basically I had no connections left in the industry, and I had no money, and so I basically decided I wanted to do something about VHS. Ken Powell and I teamed up, and we started shooting. Initially, it was going to be about a different thing, and it shifted once we start seeing like all these video stores going under. So VHS Massacre chronicles the final. It chronicles the closing of the last Blockbuster Video in New York, and then a handful of other video stores throughout New York City. And that's on the backdrop of examining how independent film was damaged by the death of the mom and pop video store. So it ended up being a little profound in a way, and it really caught steam to a point where it was everywhere from NBC Universal's Peacock TV to Mubi to Tubi. It went everywhere except Netflix, but we kind of shit on Netflix. So I think it is. Anyway, we didn't know that was going to hit. We didn't know that was going to be big, but a lot of people know it. I have students who come into my classroom and are like, "Oh no, I've seen that. Yeah, that's a good documentary," So it's definitely interesting. But that movie, VHS Massacre, was made for about $500. That's about all the money we had to put out for it. So you can build a great doc for almost nothing. In those docs there is cell phone footage. There is a one or two scenes that are cell phone footage in both of those movies. I don't really recommend it unless it's sort of you're in a store and you have to be super low key. I think if you care even a little about your film, you will figure out a way to get your hands on some kind of decent camera. Because the truth is, if you're going out and you're buying a $1,200 iPhone, you could, for that same price, you could have a Blackmagic Cinema camera and have a tremendous amount of, it could look like an actual film, and you could shoot flat, color grade, and do all that stuff to take it to that level where it will be taken more seriously. And so, in a lot of cases, the smartphones are more expensive than a halfway decent DSLR. You could get a Lumix. There's these little G7s that shoot 24 frames a second, and they have you can, I think, upgrade and get a flat mode you can shoot in, and some of that footage looks great too.